Hello and welcome to Annie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. Wight's Witch's Sabbat. The moon hung heavy in the velvet sky, its pale light spilling over the ancient oaks of Brickstone Forest on the Isle of Wight. Holly Arnold had always been drawn to the forest's eerie beauty, with its gnarled trees and moss-covered stones. Tonight, though, her steps were not leisurely. She'd been chasing the distant echo of voices, a strange, lilting chant that seemed to ripple through the air like an otherworldly hymn. The sound had started faintly as she wandered the edge of the woods after a fight with her sister. Holly had been looking for solace, but instead, she found herself irresistibly drawn to the mysterious melody. Against her better judgment, she ventured deeper into the forest. Her flashlight flickered as if warning her to turn back, but she pressed on, the ground soft and damp beneath her boots. The voices grew louder, their words indecipherable yet filled with a rhythmic cadence that chilled her to the core. She crept toward the clearing wherein a natural glow emanated, its pulsating light casting elongated shadows across the underbrush. Peering from behind a tree, Holly froze. A circle of women clad in flowing, dark robes surrounded a stone altar carved with runes that seemed to writhe and shimmer in the moonlight. Each woman held a staff topped with bones, feathers, or crystals, their movements synchronized in a hypnotic dance. At the center of the circle, a figure clad in crimson led the ritual. Her face was obscured by herd, but her presence radiated power. Holly's breath hitched as she realized what she was witnessing. This wasn't a group of modern-day Wiccans performing harmless rites. These were witches, true witches, practicing something ancient and sinister. She had heard the tales of the White Sabbat whispered among locals as little more than ghost stories to keep children from wandering into the woods. But this was real. Suddenly, the chanting ceased. The clearing plunged into an oppressive silence that made Holly's heart pound like a drum. The leader raised her hands, and the air seemed to hum with energy. A low, guttural growl echoed from the trees, and the ground beneath Holly's feet trembled. Her flashlight slipped from her grasp, clattering against a root. Every head snapped in her direction. "Who dares intrude?" the leader's voice rang out. Holly ducked behind the tree, her mind racing. She could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their collective gaze pressing against her like a physical force. She didn't have time to run, they were too close, and the forest was too dense. Her only chance was to stay hidden and pray they wouldn't find her. The witches moved as one, their movements unnervingly fluid. The air grew colder with each step they took toward her hiding place. Holly clutched her chest, willing her heart to stop its frantic rhythm. But her trembling hands betrayed her, snapping a twig underfoot. There! Holly bolted. She ran blindly through the woods, branches clawing at her face and arms. Behind her, the witches pursued, their footsteps unnaturally light yet swift. The chanting resumed, louder now, filling her ears and her mind with a maddening hum. She glanced back and immediately wished she hadn't. The witches were gaining, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. Her foot caught on a root, and she tumbled to the ground. Pain shot through her ankle, but she scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged. She spotted an old, crumbling chapel up ahead, its walls cloaked in ivy. Without thinking, she limped toward it, flinging herself through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the air was thick with decay. The chapel was long abandoned, its pews rotting and its stained glass shattered. Holly collapsed against a wall, her chest heaving. Outside, the chanting stopped. The silence was deafening. She strained her ears, but there was nothing, no footsteps, no rustling leaves. Just the sound of her own panicked breathing. She dared to hope that she had escaped, but that hope was short-lived. A voice echoed through the chapel, soft and melodic, yet dripping with malice. "You cannot hide, child." Holly turned to find the leader of the coven standing in the doorway, her crimson robe billowing as if caught in an invisible wind. The other witches appeared behind her, their faces shadowed but their glowing eyes piercing the gloom. "Please," Holly begged. "I won't tell anyone." The leader tilted her head, considering her words. Then, with a cold smile, she raised her staff. The runes on the altar began to glow, casting the room in a sickly green light. Holly felt a force pin her against the wall, her limbs paralyzed. that you trespassed on sacred ground. And now, the witches began their chant anew, their voices rising in a crescendo that shook the chapel's foundations. Holly's vision blurred as the energy in the room intensified. She could feel her body weakening, her essence being drawn toward the altar like water siphoned from a well. But then a voice not hers, not theirs, echoed through her mind. Resist. It was faint but insistent. Holly focused on it, clinging to the sliver of defiance it offered. She remembered the small pendant her grandmother had given her, a simple silver charm etched with an ancient symbol. Holly had never known its purpose, but she now felt it burning against her chest. She grasped the pendant, its warmth spreading through her fingers. The witches faltered, their chanting breaking as the green light flickered. Holly pulled the charm free and held it aloft. A brilliant light erupted from it, banishing the darkness and forcing the witches back. No, the leader screamed. The others cried out, their forms dissolving into wisps of shadow. The light consumed the chapel, and Holly's world went white. When she woke, she was lying on the forest floor, the first rays of dawn filtering through the trees. The witches were gone, the clearing eerily silent. Clutching the pendant, she rose unsteadily to her feet and limped back toward the village. Holly never spoke of what happened that night, but she avoided Breakstone Forest from then on. She often felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her, a reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed. And on nights when the moon was full, she could still hear the faint echo of their chant, carried on the wind like a warning or a promise. Holly's life on the Isle of Wight returned to a fragile semblance of normalcy after that night, but the experience left scars that went far deeper than the ones on her skin. She couldn't step into any forest without feeling her pulse quicken. Even the sight of the woods from her window sent a shiver up her spine. And though she tried to forget, the memory of the white Sabbat was a spectre that never truly left her. Weeks passed, and with them came a sense of unease. Small, strange things began to happen around her cottage on the edge of the village. At first, it was easy to dismiss a flickering light, a door creaking open on its own. But then the dreams started. Every night Holly found herself back in the forest, the witches' chant echoing through the trees. She would run, but no matter how far or fast she went, she always ended up in the clearing. The altar would glow, and the leader's voice would call out to her. She would wake drenched in sweat, the echo of the chant still ringing in her ears. One night, as a storm raged outside, Holly sat curled on her couch, clutching a cup of tea and trying to calm her frayed nerves. The pendant her grandmother had given her hung around her neck, its comforting weight a small reprieve from the terror that had gripped her since that night. A sudden knock at the door made her jump, spilling tea onto her lap. She winced and set the cup down, her heart pounding. It was nearly midnight. Who could be visiting at this hour? Cautiously, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. No one was there. Hello, she called out. The wind howled in response, rattling the windows. She was about to dismiss it as the storm playing tricks on her when the knock came again, louder this time. Gathering her courage, Holly opened the door. Nothing but darkness greeted her. She stepped onto the porch, her eyes scanning the street. Rain lashed at her face, and the wind tugged at her hair. As she turned to go back inside, she noticed something on the ground. A single black feather. Her stomach twisted. She knew she should close the door and lock it, but she couldn't stop herself from picking up the feather. It was cold to the touch, unnaturally so, and sent a chill racing up her arm. As she stepped back inside, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. A voice came from behind her. You belong to us now. She spun around, but the room was empty. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she fumbled for her flashlight. When she finally managed to turn it on, the beam illuminated the far wall and the shadow of a figure, tall and cloaked, with glowing eyes fixed on her. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and exhaustion. Holly couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her neighbors noticed her growing unease, but she brushed off their concern with forced smiles and hollow reassurances. Then the disappearances began. First, it was a hiker who had gone into Breakstone Forest and never returned. Then a local farmer found his livestock slaughtered, their blood smeared in strange patterns on the barn walls. Rumors spread like wildfire, stories of witches, curses, and old debts being collected. Holly knew the truth. The coven hadn't been destroyed that night. They were still out there, and they wanted her. She resolved to fight back. Armed with her grandmother's pendant and a handful of protective charms she'd purchased from a local folklore expert, Holly ventured back into the forest. She didn't know what she hoped to accomplish. Perhaps she could banish them for good, or perhaps she could offer herself as a final sacrifice to end the terror. The forest was eerily quiet as she retraced her steps to the clearing. The altar was still there, its runes faintly glowing in the moonlight. As she approached, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of chanting. They emerged from the shadows one by one, their eyes gleaming with malice. "You should have stayed away," the leader said. Holly clutched her pendant, its warmth steadying her resolve. "I'm not afraid of you." The leader laughed, a chilling sound that made the air around them tremble. "Oh, child." The witches began to chant, their voices weaving a spell that made the very earth beneath Holly's feet tremble. She raised the pendant high, its light cutting through the darkness. The leader snarled and stepped forward, raising her staff to strike, but Holly was ready. She whispered the words her grandmother had taught her, words she hadn't understood until now. The pendant blazed with light, and the witches shrieked as the spell unraveled around them. The clearing erupted into chaos as the coven dissolved into shadows, their screams echoing through the forest. The leader was the last to fall, her form twisting and contorting before she vanished into the night. When the light faded, Holly was alone. She stumbled out of the forest at dawn, her body bruised and her spirit weary. Though the witches were gone, she knew the cost of her defiance would follow her forever. The villagers whispered about her bravery, but Holly never felt like a hero. She had faced the darkness and survived, but the scars it left would never heal. And on certain nights, when the wind howled through the trees and the moon hung heavy in the sky, she could still hear their chant, a reminder that some battles are never truly won. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had a great day.